if insulin is storing energy, then how would it make sense that it's going to allow energy to be released at the same time? So that means anytime that we have insulin circulating in the blood, then we are constantly in that storage mode. We're constantly in also that fat suppression mode. So if we have insulin in the bloodstream, then there's no way that we can tap into our fat stores. I'm going to say that again. If we have insulin in our bloodstream, there's no way that we're going to tap into our fat stores. Are you ready to bring your dream body and health into life, but just can't seem to keep the motivation going? And is it finally time to address the self-sabotage and the unwanted eating behaviors such as binge eating, emotional eating, and nighttime eating that you know are getting in the way of your goals? Do you ever wonder what it would take for you to feel in control of your rituals so that you can stay consistent and see results? Welcome to this week's special Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, where you'll learn how to overcome unwanted eating behavior and other self-sabotaging habits by shifting your nervous system so that your body works with you instead of against you. I'm your host, Sherry Shaban, and with each episode, I am honored to be your coach and guide in the journey to make peace with food and find food and body freedom so that struggle with weight is a thing of the past. When you tune in every Thursday on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, you'll catch the latest conversation on unwanted eating behaviors and learn how to shift the nervous system, rewire the brain to new patterns, and end the food and body obsession so you finally feel relaxed and no longer confused around food. Now, before we begin, I want to quickly invite you to grab a free copy of my Food Freedom ebook that I have for you at makepeacewithfood.com. And if you find that this conversation resonates with you today, then I also want to invite you to join our free Make Peace with Food Facebook community at myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com, where you can connect with me and my team directly. The links are in the show notes. And of course, if you know somebody who you feel could benefit from these conversations and discussions, make sure to share this podcast with them too. All right, athletes, now let's get into it. So let's first start off by talking about insulin. Now, we've all heard of insulin. If you know someone who's diabetic, or if you are diabetic yourself, you know all about insulin. And you need insulin to help you with the carbohydrate metabolism. And more specifically, what insulin does is when we ingest carbohydrates and to a lesser extent proteins, then insulin is released from the pancreas. It's one of the digestive enzymes. It's released from the pancreas. It goes into the bloodstream and it collects all the blood sugar and then brings it to the muscle tissue for storage and stores as much as it possibly can there in the form of glycogen. Glycogen is a compacted form of many glucose molecules. And once that storage is full, it's going to take everything else and put it in the liver. And the liver has a larger capacity to store glucose in the form of glycogen, but that also has its limits. And so the moment that the limits of the liver are met, then everything else is converted into fat because the body's very efficient. It doesn't waste anything. If we have an excess of energy, what are we going to do with it? We're going to store it as fat. And so that's then stored in our adipose tissue. Some of us may have more adipose tissue or fat tissue around the belly or around the hips, around the thighs, or maybe even around the organs, but that's where it's going to end up going. And so insulin's main role is to store excess energy, so store energy. And this is really great for us because we're going to need energy in our muscle tissue if suddenly we need to run or jump or stand or move. Anytime we move our arms up and down, we're using that stored energy. And then anything else that comes from the liver is that reserve. It's, for example, once we are depleted from all of the stored energy in the muscle tissue and in the extremities, then we can start to rely on what's in the liver as storage. And once that's depleted, that's where we're going to start to secrete other hormones that tell us that we're hungry. So glucagon is another hormone that's secreted in response to low glycogen levels. And now we're going to need to have more food so that we can continue the storage process. So let's get into that just a little bit more. And there are two roles that insulin has. So I just shared with you the first role, which is storage. The first role that insulin has is storage. It stores energy. Now, the second role, which we don't think about, is its fat suppression mechanism as well. So think about this. If insulin is storing energy, then how would it make sense that it's going to allow energy to be released at the same time? So that means anytime that we have insulin circulating in the blood, then we are constantly in that storage mode. We're constantly in also that fat suppression mode. So if we have insulin in the bloodstream, then there's no way that we can tap into our fat stores. I'm going to say that again. If we have insulin in our bloodstream, there's no way that we're going to tap into our fat stores, because insulin's job is to drive energy to store. And number two, to keep any stored energy from being released, from being used up. And again, this is a really important process. It's an important process for survival. It's an important process to ensure that we always have energy accessible to us, so that we're not eating every second, that we're not eating all the time. And so when we manage insulin release, when we're focusing on managing insulin release, and we make sure that we're not always stimulating insulin release, that means we're also making sure we're not always in that storage mode, because our body's either in those two modes. It's either storing or it's releasing body fat. And if we want it to release body fat, then we have to manage insulin. We have to make sure that we're not always doing things, or we're in that behavior of constantly making sure that we're in that storage mode. And so how do we manage insulin release? Well, first of all, we can look at what it is that we're consuming. Again, remember, our body doesn't count calories, it counts nutrients. So if we're eating things that are more complex carbs, meaning it takes the body a harder time to break it down in the stomach and then start to put in the bloodstream and then start to deliver it, then we don't need as much insulin at one time. In fact, we can slowly deliver the insulin over a longer period of time. But when we're eating foods that have a lot of refined sugars, or that are in liquid form, or that are easily processed, then insulin is going to be released immediately, and it's not going to require the body to do that much work to put it in storage. And then the other thing that we could do also is eat less frequently. And I always get this as such a surprise. Eat less frequently? What are you talking about, Sherry? Everyone tells us that we're supposed to eat every 2 to 3 hours, and otherwise we're going to lose our lean body mass, we're going to lose muscle tissue, and so we have to really eat every 2 to 3 hours. Well, here's the thing. Constant nibbling, constant snacking throughout the day puts the body in a place where it's constantly used to needing energy from food in order to function. Because there's certain hormones that we have to create that are responsible for turning the energy that we have stored in the body as fat into usable glucose energy. But if we never have to rely on that mechanism, well, we don't have to create the hormones for it. And the body has this rule, and the rule is if you don't use it, you lose it. So that means that if I eat every 2 to 3 hours, I've trained my body to have to need to eat every 2 to 3 hours to get energy. Even if I have excess body weight, even if I have excess body fat that I'm trying to tap into, if I constantly eat every 2 to 3 hours, I'm training my body, I'm up-regulating the hormones that are required for carbohydrate metabolism, or for immediate energy metabolism. Whereas if I train my body to be more flexible and adaptable, meaning some days I might eat a little bit more frequently, other days I might eat a little bit less frequently, but my body will start to learn that, hey, I can tap into fat stores, and I can also use this food as energy. I can do both. And so this also starts to affect our hunger hormones. It starts to affect those cravings that we have. And how can we eat less frequently? Well, again, we eat less frequently depending on what our meals are composed of. Again, the body counts nutrients, not calories. And so if I'm eating foods that have a lot of empty calories, if I'm eating an entire bag of chips, or if I'm eating an entire pint of ice cream, then yes, I might be full in a moment, but in a couple hours, I'm going to be hungry again, because the body knows it didn't get what it needed. It's still not satisfied. Hey, I still need all these vitamins and these minerals, and I need this fiber, I need all these things. You didn't give it to me. Give me more food. And when we don't listen to those body's cues, Well, what happens? We tend to continue to nibble and graze and nibble and graze and never really feel full or satisfied. So the key to being able to eat less frequently and be more comfortable is to really make sure that your meals are satisfying and they're visually pleasing. They taste really good, and there's a lot of different colors and there's a lot of different textures and variety, and you're also walking away feeling really full. If all you have, by the way, is just this leafy salad for lunch, you don't really walk away very full. That's not satisfying for the body. The body didn't actually get all the nutrients it needed. It still needed proteins, and it still needed more complex carbohydrates. It needed fats. It needed a lot of different things to feel satisfaction. So we help you learn what that looks like for you in our Make Peace with Food program. But what I want you to start to do right now so that you can start to take action is just even asking yourself, am I satisfied? Do I feel full? Do I feel satisfied after this meal? Or do I still feel like something is missing? And like I said earlier, the third thing that we can do to manage insulin release is eat more real food and eat less fake food. Real food is that whole food, the food that nature created, and when I say fake food, it's really that food that man-made. It's that man-made food that you know did not come from a tree, did not come from nature. And this is not, by the way, an all or none principle. It's just eat more of this and eat less of that, because life, and especially food, is to be balanced. There has to be pleasure in life. Just make sure that you have that balance for yourself. Now, number 4, another one that's really important that many of us don't actually know about is avoiding artificial sweeteners. If we want to manage insulin release, we're going to avoid artificial sweeteners. That's all the diet sodas, the diet drinks, the 0-calorie things. Sure, it says 0 calories, but the body actually, once it tastes that feeling of sugar, that taste of sugar, that taste that it recognizes, it's still going to respond in the same way as though you gave it actual sugar. And so this is a very, very big misconception. Again, coming back to this whole calorie counting world, we believe that, well, I can get away with that. I can drink 5 diet sodas and it won't count because it's 0 calories. No, not true. Remember, the second role of insulin is to suppress fat storage. So even if I do drink a diet soda, I'm still releasing insulin. Remember, if I release insulin, there may not be any calories or any sugar in my bloodstream for storage, but the other thing that insulin is going to do in that moment is to suppress any fat cells from releasing their stored energy. That means I cannot oxidize my stored body fat. I cannot tap into my body fat reserves. Now, another way that we can manage insulin release is by following our circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm is this natural biological clock that we have, which actually aligns with the sun. And so there are certain times in the day where certain hormones are at peak. And one of the times where insulin is at its lowest is at night. And that's actually when we are supposed to prepare for sleep. The body is supposed to rest and digest. It's now going to heal itself. It's now going to recover from the day. It's going to regenerate and rejuvenate. And so if we give it a whole bunch of food that requires insulin release, well, what actually ends up happening is we tend to store whatever we ate at that time maybe twice as much as we normally would any other time during the day. Again, simply because we're more insulin resistant at that time. And this happens around 7 p.m. or so. So it's a few hours before bed that we suddenly see our insulin levels start to drop naturally to prepare us for sleep. And that's why when we nighttime snack and we are in that habit over and over again, we start to see that impact on our health. It's also why if we're able to release that one habit by shifting our nervous system, by not needing to feel safe, by having that last evening snack of the day right before bed, if we're able to release this habit, then we're actually able to see a huge impact as well on our health. Now, finally, the last thing I want to share around how to manage insulin release is to focus on increasing non-purposeful exercise. Now, non-purposeful exercise is that type of exercise that isn't planned. It's all that other movement that we do throughout the day. It's those daily steps that we get. It's all the house cleaning and the walking to the parking lot. It's all that extra steps that we do that requires actually low heart rate in order to do it. And so the more that we are engaging in this activity, meaning the more we just walk, we don't even have to worry about running or any high intensity stuff, the more that we do that, we actually are able to level out insulin in the body. Thank you for listening to this week's Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast. If this has resonated with you today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the show so you never miss a beat. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, then please share this episode with them. Let's work together to help as many people as possible make peace with food and fall in love with fitness. And by the way, I need to mention that if you rate and review this podcast on iTunes and send over the screenshot to Sherry at sherryshaban.com, you'll receive a $500 voucher to join me at one of my upcoming retreats or to use it in our Make Peace with Food coaching program. And don't forget to visit myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com to join the free Facebook group for more resources. And remember, athlete, you are an inspiration. I cannot wait to hear your story.